Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here for the SoonerScoop.com studios. Josh McCuistion down in HQ Houston. It's kind of here, almost here. Spring ball starting for Oklahoma next week. It is time for a recruiting report as we roll into what should be an interesting week. We will be talking to Brent Venables coming up on Wednesday, as well as a bunch of the newcomers to the Oklahoma football program. That should be somewhat interesting, George. Yeah. I haven't talked to those guys really since the beginning of the year, or not even the beginning of the year, but the end of last year down in San Antonio at the Alamo Bowl. So we'll be exciting to talk to a bunch of the new guys.
Yeah.
We were talking about it this morning. It's kind of weird that talking to Casey Thompson for the first time, a bunch of the guys that have joined the program here over the last month or so.
Yeah, it's gonna be really fun. But before we get into that stuff and a recruiting report, Eddie, it is your birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
What is
you
it?
for reminding me.
The big 4-0?
Yeah. No, not hardly. Jesus Christ. I don't think that I'm going to be making it to 40, but yeah, I appreciate it. It is nowhere else I'd rather be than right here in the SoonerScoop.com studios, as well as the Lloyd Noble Center tonight for what should amount to be a massive game for Oklahoma in their NCAA tournament hopes against Cincinnati. So, yeah, hopefully I make it on the big board or something. But
that'd be awesome.
I appreciate it. We'll see if we make it to 38. We'll just try to make it through 37. And then on into 40. How dare you? That's just so uncalled for to a certain extent. Future Freaks this weekend. It is kind of the start of what should be an interesting spring for Oklahoma. A number of guys coming into Norman this weekend, Josh. And I guess we'll just start here. When you're talking about the Future Freak stuff, obviously 2025 is next up in terms of signing class. But maybe a focus more so on the 2026 guys this weekend?
Yeah, that's what you're going to see a lot of. And it shouldn't surprise everybody. That's kind of what OU's tipping you off to with this Future Freaks name for the day. Yeah, but you see a few 26 guys. Honestly, I expect more 2027 guys than I do of that 2025 senior to B group. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of Oklahoma starting to, like I've said before, kind of starting to lay the bricks, of that foundation of that 26 class, which they already have one commitment who will be there, Jonathan Hatton, the running back from Cibolo Steel in the San Antonio area. So they've started off really strong. Hatton's pretty much a consensus top 75 player in the country. I think could push into the top 50s, top 40s. He's a very, very talented running back. And, so Oklahoma's got a nice start there, but this is where you start to try and get those – not only the coaching staff and their relationships with these players, but these players getting more familiar with each other and getting to know each other and, getting in these text groups and kind of starting to build those bonds that build a class over time.
It seems like the running back group is something to watch for. I know that there was a lot of attention put on, certainly when you bring in the number one running back in the 2024 class and Taylor Tatum and the host of guys that they brought in that room. There's a couple guys that probably are familiar to Oklahoma high school football fans, and certainly, maybe nobody better known than the son of Kewan Jones and Caden Jones, who has made waves already at Jinx, as well as another one of his teammates in a 2027 running back. It seems like Jinx is starting to load up for what is going to be a really good couple seasons moving forward with Samaj Stanford as well.
Yeah, Jinx is sitting at only one state title in the last 3 years. So, it's been a cold streak for this poor, sad Trojans. But, with the young talent like they've got in Caden Jones at running back, and don't forget, Caden Jones is also a guy that a lot of people like as corner. I know, Eddie, our mutual buddy up there at Jinx, would be more than happy if Caden Jones wanted to take every snap at corner.
No doubt.
So there's a lot of ability there. And this is a guy, very different body type than Kewan. I know people that, will remember Kewan, will kind of remember him as kind of a shorter, stockier, more compact back. Caden's 6'1", very long-armed, long-legged kind of guy. Just a very different body type, but super talented, just like his dad in that way. But yeah, had a huge sophomore year for Jinx. I expect that to continue. And then you move over to the defensive side of the ball, Samaj Stanford, the safety, younger brother of Houston, freshman safety, I guess going into his second year now, Jalen Stanford, that was a really good player for the Trojans for several years there. So Samaj is a guy that you hear, I remember when Jalen was junior, senior, you're like, wait till you see his brother. His brother's really, really good. And, a guy that plays as a freshman for Jinx, you're something pretty special. That's that Gabe Lynn, Stephen Parker, those kind of guys that you just don't see every day, even at a great program like Jinx. So yeah, there's a big contingent of Trojans, but like you mentioned, Eddie, the running back room, you got Rylan Morris coming in from a small town back in Texas, along with Javion Osborne, kind of one of the early favorites for the #1 running back in the state of Texas, along with Jonathan Hatton. I think those two may be the kind of clear front runners right now. And then Rylan Morris, obviously, like I said, another Texan. So that running back group is, frankly, I think DeMarco Murray could just kind of throw his hat in there and say, two of you that are in, let's go, and we'll be good. Like, I don't think he is too concerned about which is which, because they're all ultra talented and some of their, earliest offers at the position.
Josh, the 2026 is so far away. It kind of hurts my brain to think about that. But, you look at the 2024 class, defensive line was a huge focus. 2025 class seems like the offensive line is going to be a huge focus. What position group do you think Oklahoma is really looking at to add there? I'm sure the trenches is going to be a huge focus. And who are some guys maybe in that position group that might be in town this weekend?
Yeah, obviously we know that Brent Venables and, Seth Luttrell on the offensive staff, and however you want to kind of deem that breakup, they know that playing in the SEC every single year, you've got to be landing elite guys up front. That's just the way this is going to go. The two main guys that on the offensive side of the ball that will be there that I know of and have confirmed, and again, I want to be clear that there's going to be some names on this that we haven't confirmed yet, and I want to kind of check with and run by some people. But the first two are Zayden Crimpen, the offensive lineman from Prosper, Texas, a guy that I had a chance to see in person last season. Kind of ended his season against North Crowley last year. Big athletic guy, definitely a tackle type. Really likes Oklahoma. Has talked about how much he likes that proximity to home. And I think it's a big deal for Oklahoma to get him up so early. The other is a name that's going to be familiar to people. And guys, I think we talked about him recently, Drew Evers, the big offensive lineman from Flower Mound, younger brother of former Oklahoma quarterback Nick Evers. And it's a guy that, like I said before, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, Nick left early and, there's some bad blood. And I don't get that feeling. That's not the impression I have. This is not a trip they have to take. This is one they want to take. They want to be around Bill Bedenbaugh, who's a guy that they knew. But we also have to remember how expedited Nick's recruitment was. There's a lot of guys on that staff that maybe they didn't get to have the normal recruiting process with and really get to know everybody. They knew Jeff Lebby really well. They knew Brent Venables really well, but they didn't get to meet everybody and really have those deep connected relationships. Drew came down last summer, picked up his offer from Bill, and they've stayed in touch ever since. So for Oklahoma to get him there now, like I said, it's just a good kind of foundational piece. On the defensive side of the ball, the only name I know is supposed to be there is a guy named, and I love this name, Dutch Horrisk, a defensive lineman from St. John Bosco in California. I have not yet confirmed he has an offer. If he doesn't have one when he leaves, I'll be pretty surprised. That's kind of how I expect that to play out. But either way, this is a guy from a huge program, kind of part of that huge Trinity League in California with Bosco and Mater Dei and all these big-time programs. So I think you're starting to see Oklahoma really make themselves a bigger presence in the right battles in Southern California. And I think this could be one of those guys they're willing to kind of go to war for.
An anticipated list up on SoonerScoop.com. It was included in last week's Sooner Scoop. Great time to join Sooner Scoop as well. $1 for the month, and go from there. Kind of get you hooked in here as spring football, really truly begins, and it's going to be a really interesting spring bowl just in terms of everything that comes with the SEC. There are two names from a school that I feel like was a mainstay when we would make the spring tour. Lawton MacArthur, the good city of Lawton, Oklahoma, down in southwest Oklahoma. It seems like there is maybe a little bit of resurgence down in those parts, Josh.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar with Lawton, obviously huge military town. There's a lot of fluctuation from year to year. You get guys that are not just moving, they don't move across town or across the state. They move across the country, and sometimes they move in, sometimes they go out. So there's been times when MacArthur thought they had a guy and, he ends up leaving or whatever. So they've had to deal with some of that. But, yeah, you look at safety Adam Austin and wide receiver Joshua Rushing. These are two really talented guys, big, long athletes, already have Power 5 offers. So they're definitely guys that Oklahoma has interest in. I think they want to kind of size them up, get a look at them. These are a couple of guys that work with C4 and Sean Cooper and that whole group in South Oklahoma. And so, you look at the track record. Oklahoma at Lawton MacArthur has worked out pretty well. There's been Jamal Brown and Javon Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 6 years of starting experience between those two guys. So a lot of good wins there at MacArthur. I mean, not a lot, but the ones that they have won have worked out really well for everybody. So I think you're going to see maybe one of those guys pick up an offer this weekend. I kind of look at Austin a little bit. He's picked up a lot of groundswell early on, and we know Brandon Hall, as the safeties coach, has not only been very proactive, but he's also been very active in state. He's a local guy. He likes the in-state guys. He has a lot of respect for the play of football in Oklahoma. So I think there's something to that. But yeah, it is. You're starting to see a resurgence. I mean, I mentioned Javon Harris.
I was going to
say.
You've
got Javon Harris at Lawton Knight, who's got some guys. So yeah, I mean, Lawton, it's kind of been quiet, Eddie. Like you said, that used to be an absolute stop for us every year, and it's really kind of died off. But I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see Lawton have some more Division I guys coming out.
I almost feel like it's been since Jalen Barnett down at Lawton High that we haven't really had to go down to Lawton, make the three school run that we used to make. It used to be almost like a 2-day trip. You're gonna go down the turnpike down to Lawton, but good to see. I always like going down there, and it's a good excuse to stop off at Jake's and Chickasha. Ever heard of that?
I have.
Have you?
I've not been there, but I've heard of it.
It doesn't surprise me. You haven't been. All right. Well, good. No, it will be really interesting. I mean, is it too early, Josh, to look at a weekend like this and go, yeah, you should expect a couple commits to come out of it?
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if you see anything like that. We know that Brent Venables, even with the seniors, they're very low key. It's not a high press. They're not going to really push you on these things. They have the whole turn your chip in, that kind of stuff, which is something that just puts it in the kids' court. When you're ready, okay, we're here and we're willing to take it. So I think that's what you're going to see is Oklahoma largely saying, hey, we have a spot for you. We may be recruiting 5 other guys, 10 other guys, whatever it may be at your position, and we've got X amount of spots. But whenever you're ready, take your time, take your visits. They know these kids, it's super early. Again, Jonathan Hatton, it almost surprised me when OU took his commitment. Not that he's not ultra talented. He absolutely is. But just in almost a, hey, man, like we know you got a long ways to go. You're in the San Antonio area, near Texas, near A&M, near Baylor, near all of it. And I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of tried to talk him out of it a little bit and just, he thought he knew what he wanted to do when he pulled the trigger. So this will also be big because Jonathan, for that early commitment, hasn't gotten up to Oklahoma a lot with all that he has going on with track, and obviously Steele made a deep run of playoffs like they always do. So he hasn't had a lot of the free windows to make a lot of this travel. But I will say, for those kind of wondering about him, I want to fill in a little bit. I was talking to Jonathan last week, and he was talking about running track and what he runs. This is a kid that goes about 210 as a high school sophomore, and he's telling me he's hoping to run like sub 10.6 in the 100-meter this year. So, like, this is a big, really, really talented athlete that Oklahoma should feel really good about having, already in the books.
Josh, I wanted to ask you about one more guy before we move on, and we were talking about him off air before we get on here, but Nelson Peterson Jr. just announced he's going to be coming, 2026 quarterback, and the younger brother of former Oklahoma running back Adrian Peterson. What should people know anything about him? I mean, I know that you've talked a little bit about some of those 2026 quarterbacks. What should fans know maybe about Nelson Peterson Jr.?
Well, he's definitely a big, it's shocking that a relative of Adrian Peterson is a big, good-looking athlete. Like, there's no question about it. I've seen it. I've never seen him in person, but he's about 6'2", 6'3", from what I've been told. Like you would expect, very athletic, very much a dual threat guy, going to get out of the pocket, make some plays that way. But he's not a kid that is strictly a runner. From everything I've gathered, he is a legitimate dual threat rather than a guy that's waiting to move to receiver or something. I'm going to be interested to see how OU plays this weekend because, guys, we've talked about it a lot. They've already got multiple quarterback offers in, but multiple quarterback offers out. But what's interesting is the guy that I thought was going to be on campus this weekend was Legend Bay. Legend had a basically a track date change. And so thought he was going to be able to go and then go to the track meet the next day. Instead, he's going to be at the track meet and won't be able to make it to junior day. So Nelson Peterson Jr. is going to be the quarterback on campus this weekend, to my knowledge, unless somebody else makes a late change. So Oklahoma can kind of pour attention on him, really get a feel for him, what he's about, kind of, how he fits into their plans. And I'm not expecting an offer. I don't think anything like that's going to happen this weekend. But I do think it's a chance to kind of continue to build that relationship, which we all know, if Oklahoma gets involved with Nelson Peterson Jr., there's a good chance they're going to be in a really good spot. So they get to kind of play this out. And not only do they kind of evaluate him from a personal standpoint and get to know him a little bit better, but also kind of get a feel for where it's going to be and kind of, how long can we kind of watch and continue to evaluate before we have to say, okay, we got to make a decision on this guy and kind of move forward in whichever direction they may go.
Somebody that you did confirm will be in town on the date of the Oklahoma spring game, which was announced on Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock kickoff. We knew the date, didn't have the kickoff time, 1 o'clock on April 20th. 2026 quarterback Faison Brandon from from Greensboro, North Carolina, Grimsley High School. You had a little bit about him in the scoop last week. Kind of seems like maybe that's the guy in 2026 if you had to choose one right now.
It's really interesting because what I think is what we're learning about Seth Littrell, I don't think Seth Littrell has a type.
Yeah.
Other than he wants a guy who can move. Like all of the guys he's offered, they are all very athletic. They're all very comfortable getting out of the pocket. But you have a guy like Faison, and then you have a guy, Jaden O'Neal is similar from California. Bigger, more prototypical body type passers, but are very athletic guys, can absolutely get outside of the pocket and move around. And then you have a guy like Darian Coleman from Florida and Legend Bay from Texas, who are more like those 5'11", 6 foot, really athletic, just truly dynamic runners. And so, again, I think Seth Littrell is showing some flexibility in what he's going to prioritize and who he wants to get. I think it's not unlike we used to see with Jeff Lebby and even Lincoln Riley, where there was you have to be at least, to a certain level as a passer before we're going to take you seriously at quarterback. But they want you to pass that, and then they want you to be able to run. Like that is something that's clearly a factor here for this for Seth Littrell and what he wants to do. So I think that's something Oklahoma fans can look forward to as we go forward with Seth Littrell, and you can kind of see what he's going to be about. He wants an athletic quarterback who can move his feet and make plays outside the pocket.
You both had a part in the story that came out on Monday. It seems like, and I don't know if there's anything to be put into it, but in terms of coaching the quarterback, there was an addition to the staff here with the hire of an analyst, George.
Yeah, Josh actually heard it first. Kevin Johns, the former offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Duke, is going to come on and be the offensive analyst, and from my understanding, work with the quarterbacks. Basically, he's taking over what Seth Littrell did last year, where Seth Littrell was in the quarterbacks room. He worked with most of the offense and worked really closely with Jeff Lebby. Kevin Johns will work closely with Seth Littrell, and it makes a lot of sense because you look at Kevin Johns' history. His first gig in coaching was under Kevin Wilson as a GA at Northwestern back in 1999. He went on to coach with Kevin Wilson at Indiana, as well as Seth Littrell. They were co-offensive coordinators at Indiana for a time. So there's definitely a lot of connections there, and I think it's a pretty good hire, considering that, look, Seth Littrell hasn't called plays in a while. Kevin Johns was the play caller for Duke the last couple years, so he can help in that role. And then also he's coached quarterbacks, and I know that that's kind of been somewhat of a concern for some people is, Seth Littrell's never coached quarterbacks before. Now all of a sudden you bring in a guy that the last, 11 of his last 12 years in coaching, he was a quarterbacks coach. He coached quarterbacks at several different schools, including, Memphis and Duke and I believe Indiana as well. So, I think that it's a really good fit for Oklahoma, and a guy that, if he's here only a year, I think that he can really help and give a hand to Seth Littrell.
If nothing else, probably just having another voice in that room probably helps a little bit as well.
Definitely.
So Riley
and having a guy that – sorry.
I was just going to say.
Also,
go. Go for it.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not talking now.
Like I said, and it's not just about having a guy that has quarterback experience, because I think that's a valid question. I mean, that's something that Seth Luttrell throughout his career, we haven't really seen him do. But what I think is interesting is this is a guy that's not just, oh, he's a quarterbacks coach. He's worked with Seth Luttrell. As you know, I know George mentioned that, but it makes it easier to bridge that gap of communication, of what you want to do, what you're trying to relay to your quarterback. I think that all just becomes easier. And guys, I mean, we watched Duke last year when Riley Leonard was healthy. That was a very effective offense that moved the ball against some good defenses.
No doubt about it. It should be kind of fun. I think it is. This is kind of one of those times of the year, and especially if you get into the college basketball world, that there's a lot going on. But there is a ton of football to be done here over the next month or so. Certainly here in Norman, with everything that Zach Allen being able to talk to some of those guys, just being able to get out there and see some of the practices as well. It's going to be kind of fun. Josh, I know we're going to do a separate football spring preview, but is there anything that you're just really dying to know here coming over the next month and a half with Oklahoma out on the practice field?
Well, one is not going to surprise anybody, and we'll get that one out. Offensive line, I'm dying to see what that looks like. I want to know what the center situation is, because I think tackle, I think we pretty much know what it's going to look like. I think Michael Tarquin's a little bit of a wild card, and we'll kind of see what his role is, how he's going to play into things. But at tackle, I think we have some understanding. At guard, I feel pretty confident in Fabechi Nwewu, or however, I know I can never say his name right. He is my Eddie as far as name goes. But the center position and left guard, I think there are valid questions there. And I think there are potential answers that make sense to me, but I don't know what they are yet. I mean, are they going to give a young guy like Eugene Brooks, is he going to get a really serious look? Or, does Daniel Akinkunmi maybe get a look at left guard? There's a lot of, valid ideas that I think are interesting. The other would be wide receiver, and that's very much coming from a different area where offensive line's got a lot of question marks. Receiver, I know the receiver room is going to be really good. I just want to see how it's going to play out. Like, is it, does Jaquez Petaway really make a step forward? Does Nick Anderson maybe become that premier number one guy that I think most of us believe he absolutely has the ability to be? And at times showed that ability. But guys, I was listening to a podcast actually the other day, and they were talking about young and up-and-coming receivers around college football. Nick Anderson didn't even get mentioned. And I would say that's probably an oversight, probably a miss, but I think it says something that I don't think nationally everyone is prepared for the kind of year that I think he could have.
Sure. I think he could have. I mean, it would not shock me if he led the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Like, that would not be a shocking development. I think the big question for me, Eddie, and we're going to get into all of this in the spring preview, but can those young defensive linemen make an impact? Because you lose Jacob Lacey for the year. I mean, Brent Venables just announced that on the Oklahoma Breakdown podcast. So hearing from Brent about that, with the blood clot issues, I think is going to be interesting. But now all of a sudden it's like, okay, David Stone, Jaden Jackson, Nigel Smith, Danny Okoye, Wyatt Gilmore, can you guys, and it's not all those guys don't need to step up, but can 1, 2, or 3 of those guys make an immediate impact? And I'm not saying they need to start from day one, but can a David Stone have the impact that we think he might? And it'll be interesting to hear from those guys. We're going to get to talk to them for the first time as Oklahoma football players here tomorrow. But that's kind of my big question on the defensive side. Is I feel like they're pretty set in almost every other position. There's going to be some interesting battles. Corner I think is going to be one. Safety, you have a lot of options. Linebacker, obviously a lot of depth. But for me, what does that defensive line end up looking like, and how many of those young guys can make an immediate impact? Just
to add on top of what Josh said about the wide receiver position, I think it's going to be interesting to see just what the status is for Andrell Anthony going into the spring, coming off the ACL injury that he sustained mid-year during the season a year ago. So real quick before we get out of here, to kind of wrap things up on the recruiting side of things, there has been a new recruiting prediction machine put in by the RPM, put in by Justin Wells from Inside Texas, and notable for many reasons, but 5-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood, somebody that we have talked about right here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube report. Josh, you went and saw him a year ago. There was already certainly a good relationship with Bill Beanabo, but positive news in that regard. He hasn't committed, but maybe sounds like the Sooners are certainly in good standing there.
Yeah, they really are. And this is something we should explain to people. This is something On3 kind of wanted people to go out, make some predictions, do some things that really just kind of get that RPM machine going, because as we make more predictions, it can kind of fine tune itself. Sure. And, there's a better idea of what maybe these kids are going to do and what they're thinking. So it has a lot of inputs that are very mechanized, but it has a lot that is based on people like myself. And you mentioned Justin Wells and some of the other insiders, kind of, okay, what are these guys hearing? What are they predicting? Justin's been pretty high on OU and Ty Haywood for a while. I'm not going to say I'm going to put in a prediction, but I'm considering doing something like that today. When I look at, maybe 2 or 3 guys I would like to make picks for, he'd be on that short list. And I think Oklahoma is in great space with him. Really, really likes Bill Bedenbaugh. There's a really strong relationship there. I think Ty is one of those guys that doesn't want a lot of the fluff, doesn't need a lot of the I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, we all know the silly stuff that old guys like me say, but all the stuff on visits that doesn't really equate to you're a great football player. That's not what Ty's worried about. Ty wants to know about what your NFL production is like. He wants to know how you're developing guys. Those are things where Oklahoma can check the boxes. So I think they're in really good shape. We've talked before about Oklahoma really doing well in Denton ISD in recent years, notably Jackson Arnold and Peyton Bowen from Geyer a couple of years ago. So I like where they are. Again, I'm going to have a couple predictions later in the day. If you want to hang around, see if maybe Ty Haywood is one of them, it's possible. So like I said, I like where they are. I'm not certain of anything with him. But I would say of the elite offensive tackles that they're in on, that we talk a lot about in the recruiting report, I would say that Ty Haywood is probably the one I feel the most confident in at this point.
You're painting a picture of characterization of somebody that would fit the Bill Bedenbaugh model.
Let's put it this way. Ty Haywood is the only guy of this group that I know of that will generally not get back to me via text message or DM. Like, he is not interested in any of that stuff. Like, he doesn't want to know what camps, like, he don't want to talk about what camps he's going to or anything like that. He is a very direct guy. But then again, at the same time, he's the man famous for, the flop heard around the world, probably the most famous flop in Scoop history.
No doubt.
So, yeah.
Real quick, there was another town in Oklahoma that will be represented at Future Freaks that I don't know if we have ever discussed. Hugo, Oklahoma, 2026 wide receiver Quincy Shelton.
I like this kid a lot. Like, again, another guy another C4 Sean Cooper guy. And guys, I want to take a second and give Sean a little credit. Like, we know all about the whole thing last year with this Davian Sims and all that stuff, all the rumors, and that, OU wasn't going to be involved. I think he's got 4 guys that are going to be at the junior day on Saturday. So I think we can put all that stuff to rest. But secondarily, I remember talking to Sean 5 years ago and him telling me about all this talent that was in southern Oklahoma and southeastern specifically. And I was like, Sean, I don't know. I've covered this a long time. He's proven himself right. I mean, every year he's finding these guys out of nowhere. He found a 6'8" basketball player that picked up I believe a Texas Tech and an Arkansas offer this week. Big, like 6'8" wide receiver in southeastern Oklahoma. So he's done an outstanding job. And getting Quincy is another one. He's about 6'2", 6'3", very good acceleration. Looks like a guy that could be a really good route runner as time goes on. But just has a big body and very good in the air. So again, I don't think this is a guy that I expect to pick up an offer this weekend. But if you told me, by the start of his junior season he had one, I don't think that's crazy. I think he's a really talented kid. And these aren't courtesy, in-state visits. Like, these are guys that Oklahoma legitimately likes, and I could see getting seriously involved with down the road.
Hugo, what is that, 2A?
Good question.
I think it's 3.
3A?
I think it's 3,
Maybe
but I'm
3A?
not sure.
It's crazy. And I know that we've talked about this before, but you go down to Durant or Sherman or that entire area, it seems like, I think we've been saying it for the last couple of years, that's just going to be like one big metropolis from southeast Oklahoma or the border of Oklahoma down all the way through the North DFW area. I don't even know if that would be considered DFW, but the North Texas, it certainly is growing. It seems like almost by the week.
Well, yeah. I mean, guys, I can remember a time when Texarkana was a true, like, battleground recruiting area. Texoma is starting to become that way with all that you're seeing coming from the very extreme North Texas area and that very extreme southeastern Oklahoma. And, again, a lot of that's due to Sean, but at the same time, that talent's been there for a while. And I think he's done a great job recognizing that and, giving these kids some spotlight that clearly they've deserved.
Like you said, it's not just football. There's baseball players, basketball players. Seems like women's basketball players, softball players. I've seen people go back down there and train, getting over with their D1 season, going back down to Southeast Oklahoma. So they're doing a really good job. Real quick, last but not least, Under Armour event coming up on Sunday. Josh, you and I will both be down there. It's kind of a yearly stop going down there on a Sunday afternoon to what is usually a really, really good camp.
Yeah, I would expect you're going to have kind of like what we keep talking about, a lot of these big-time offensive linemen. I would expect Michael Fasusi to be there. I would expect probably Ty Haywood to be there. Like, you go down the list, you're going to have a lot of guys because a lot of these guys are either going just to kind of keep their Under Armour relationship together or hoping to get an invite to the Under Armour All-American game. Sure. So this is one of those camps where there is actually a reason. More and more of these senior guys, I don't want to go. What's the reason for that? I already have 50 offers and all this sort of stuff. There is something that they can get out of this that they hope to. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to see. And like I said, with these guys that are going to be in Norman on Saturday, we're going to get to talk to a lot of them on Sunday at the camp. So get a chance not just to read an article, but Eddie's going to be there. We're going to have a microphone and camera in their face, and we're going to ask them, what they did, what stood out to them. And, obviously at camps like these, you also kind of get a chance to get a feel for these guys a little better when they're around other players and kind of what their personality is. Are they kind of I hate to say it, but like, are they an alpha guy? Are they kind of more kind of hanging back and a little more timid? And that you can read into those whatever you want to, but it does give you a better idea of what kind of personalities you're talking about. And with the way Oklahoma recruits, that has merit. That's a valuable thing because that's the kind of thing they do take account of.
Not too far removed from the days when Deion Sanders would be working with the cornerbacks down there at these high school events and camps and stuff. And I think that's where the deep-seated hatred began. But that's neither here nor there.
I just need to turn a camera on you, Eddie. When the guy that we all know, the DB coach that gets everybody fired up, does all
awesome.
the warm-ups. We need a camera on you doing the work. Like, I'll turn it around. I'll hold the camera for a change. We'll let you do some work.
Sunday mornings usually aren't my best unless I'm in mass, unless I'm in a pew in a Catholic church.
I haven't seen you at mass in a while, though.
I think I've been banned. I don't know. Maybe so. All right, Josh, we appreciate it. It is, kind of the start of everything that's to come. Another spring football season, because we go from college and then all of a sudden I feel like we blink and we're doing the spring tour here at the end of May, with all the high school kids. So should be a lot of fun. Soonerscoop.com, good time to sign up. $1 promo right now. Just go to Soonerscoop.com for $1 a month. Seems like a pretty good deal here with spring ball started up next week from Oklahoma. Once again, we will be talking to Brent Venables coming up on Wednesday to get a little bit of insight. First time that we've talked to him since the end of the 2023 season down in San Antonio at the Alamo Bowl. That went well. And, what's so funny?
It did not go well.
No, it didn't. Josh, we appreciate it. We will catch you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page for a recruiting report, probably wrapping up everything next week from the Future Freaks over the weekend. For Josh, for George, I'm Eddie. We'll talk to you next time.